My name is Shakira and Peter is my stepdad. I never planned to fall into temptation. But when your mother marries a man with eyes that linger too long and smiles that promise too much, something in you starts to shift. I was 25, old enough to know better, but too curious to walk away. It was supposed to be 10 minutes of stolen pleasure. Just Peter and me. Until I invited my friend into the game. Until a photo changed everything. And now I'm telling you what really happened in room 205. The room where our lives fell apart. I know I'm a bad girl, but before you judge me, pay attention. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, do well to subscribe, like, and hit on notifications. To all my returning subscribers, thanks for stopping by. Let us begin. It wasn't supposed to happen. That's the story I tell myself every time I look back. But the truth is, I knew. I knew the moment I crossed the threshold into Peter's world that nothing would ever be the same again. I was 25 years old, still living under my mother Tyler's roof, though it wasn't really her roof anymore. It was Peter's. Peter, my stepfather, had a life full of luxuries most people only dreamt of. A business mogul towering over everyone he met. His presence was like a storm that couldn't be ignored. Tall, fit, with a charm so thick it could wrap itself around anyone. I often found myself watching him from the corner of my eye. His polished appearance, his deep laugh that seemed to make the air around him shift. When Tyler married him, everything changed. Tyler had been my mother, yes, but she was more like a distant friend in my world. She was always busy with her beauty queen business, her reputation, her events, and her travels. And then came Peter, distant and yet so close, a man with ambitions that often bordered on obsession. His eyes, I noticed first, lingered just a moment too long when he looked at me. It wasn't just the lingering gaze. It was the way he spoke, how he would brush against me too often, his fingers grazing my arm in a seemingly casual touch that left something heavy hanging in the air. It wasn't that I hadn't noticed before. I had, but I ignored it. Or maybe, I convinced myself it didn't matter. He was my stepfather, after all, a man my mother adored. I never dared to think otherwise, to see the way he made me feel in those quiet, private moments. But then one night, when my mother was off to one of her galas, Peter found me in the living room, alone. "You look beautiful tonight, Shakira," he said with that familiar smile. "I've always thought you were stunning, but tonight something about you is different." His eyes slid down my form, a slow, appreciative look that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't explain. I could have smiled, thanked him, and changed the subject. I should have. But instead I stood there frozen, unsure of how to respond. Thank you. I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Peter's smile never faded, but it deepened, as if he were savoring a secret between us. "I know it's silly, but I've always had this fantasy, Shakira. Would you do something for me?" My heart raced. The way he said it, his voice was smooth, almost coaxing. But there was an edge of something darker in it. Something that both frightened and intrigued me. "What kind of fantasy?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. He leaned closer, the air between us thick with tension. "I've always dreamed of someone rubbing my back. Just a simple touch. Nothing more. I'd like you to come with me to a hotel room just for 10 minutes. Help me relax. Nothing more, I promise." My mind screamed, "No, absolutely not." But my body didn't listen. There was something in the way his gaze softened, his voice dripping with subtle persuasion, that made it hard to walk away. I tried to reason with myself, tried to remind myself that this wasn't right, but the temptation gnawed at me like a hunger I hadn't known existed. It wasn't that I was innocent, not by any means. I'd lived a life full of adventures and experiences, some of which I was proud of, others not so much. But this was different. This was Peter, my mother's husband, my stepfather. But the idea of it lingered. The thrill, the illicit nature of the request, how wrong it felt yet how much it called to me. I agreed. The decision felt like a slip, a slide down a path I never intended to follow. I told myself I would go, do it quickly, and leave without anything more than a strange, unsettling memory to store away. But I wasn't prepared for the aftermath. It wasn't just Peter, not in the way he expected. My friend Anna, someone who had always been curious about the world in ways I hadn't dared, joined me. She was bold, unafraid, and often pushed me into situations I would have otherwise avoided. When Peter opened the door to his suite, he greeted both of us with a broad smile, his eyes never once leaving mine. His hand brushed against mine as he stepped aside for us to enter. The room was dark, lit only by the dim glow of the lamps and the city lights outside. The atmosphere felt too intimate, too charged, as if we had crossed into a space where the rules didn't apply. I thought it would be just us, Peter said, eyeing Anna with some confusion. I wasn't sure why I invited her. Maybe it was to feel less alone, less guilty. Maybe it was the fear of what might happen if it was just Peter and me. But as the night unfolded, I realized that I had miscalculated. What was meant to be 10 minutes of satisfying Peter's simple, odd request turned into something darker, something more dangerous. Anna and I, in our own way, satisfied Peter's desires. We were complicit, and we did it with a kind of reckless abandon. Neither of us said a word to each other, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. We knew what we were doing, what we had agreed to, and in that moment there was no turning back. The night felt like it was spinning, like the edges of reality were blurring into something I couldn't quite grasp. As we entered the luxurious hotel suite, the weight of what I had agreed to hit me in waves. The polished marble floors, the soft glow from the lamps, the crisp scent of expensive perfume in the air. Everything in this room screamed luxury and indulgence. But underneath it all there was an undeniable tension. Peter's presence loomed, commanding and unwavering. Peter closed the door behind us, and I could hear the quiet click of the lock turning. It felt final, like a boundary crossed that could never be undone. Anna gave me a quick, almost nervous glance, but she didn't say anything. She seemed oddly calm, as if this was just another night of pushing limits. I, on the other hand, was starting to feel a surge of anxiety, mixed with an inexplicable thrill. Peter moved toward the sofa, gesturing for us to sit. "Make yourselves comfortable," he said, his voice low and smooth, with that familiar drawl that made my skin tingle. His eyes, however, never left me. He studied me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe, as if he were savoring the moment, drawing it out before finally acting. I tried to act casual, to shake off the growing sense of dread. I didn't expect it to be like this," I said, half to myself. Peter chuckled softly, his lips curling into a smile. "What did you expect, Shakira? That it would be easy, that you could walk in here and not feel the weight of it all?" I wasn't sure how to answer that. I had expected a brief encounter, an innocent request for a back rub, nothing more. But this was quickly turning into something else entirely. Anna settled next to me, her body relaxed, her eyes darting between Peter and me as if studying us. She didn't seem affected by the situation the way I was, and that only made me feel more out of place. I could tell she was intrigued, maybe even excited by the situation. I wasn't sure what I felt, except for the growing knot in my stomach, the prickling sensation on my skin, as I wondered just how far Peter wanted to take this. Peter seemed to sense my hesitation. He walked over to where I was sitting and knelt down in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body radiating off him. "Shakira," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "It's just a back rub. Nothing more. I won't bite. I just want to feel your touch. That's all." His words should have reassured me, but they didn't. They only added another layer of tension, an unspoken promise of things that could happen, things I wasn't sure I was ready for. But before I could protest, Peter gently took my hand and guided it toward his back. "Go on," he urged, his voice low, almost coaxing. I hesitated, my heart hammering in my chest. But as I touched his back, my fingers brushing over his suit, I felt a strange rush of power. It wasn't the kind of power that came from control. It was the power of being desired. The kind that made my pulse quicken, my breath hitch in my throat. It wasn't just a back rub anymore. Peter's body seemed to lean into my touch, urging me to go deeper, to press harder. His breathing became more shallow, more erratic, and for a moment, I thought I could hear his heartbeat pounding in my ears. But then something shifted. The atmosphere changed. It wasn't just Peter anymore. Anna had moved closer, sitting on the armrest of the chair beside us, watching intently. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted, as if she was taking in every detail of the scene unfolding before her. Peter shifted, looking at Anna. "You want to join us?" he asked, his voice surprisingly calm. Anna nodded, her lips curving into a mischievous grin. "Why not?" she replied. Before I could fully process what was happening, Anna slid next to me on the couch, her body brushing against mine in a way that felt too intimate, too inviting. She placed her hand on Peter's other shoulder, mirroring my movements. I had never planned for this. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But now, as Anna and I both touched Peter, the situation seemed to take on a life of its own. We were both complicit in this bizarre, twisted game, and I couldn't stop myself from participating. Peter's hands gripped the sides of the couch, his body responding to our touches, to the heat that seemed to fill the room. It wasn't just about the back rub anymore. The room, the dim lighting, the soft hum of music in the background. It all became a blur of sensation and uncertainty. For a moment, everything felt like it was spinning out of control, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't pull away. And neither could Anna. She leaned in, her breath warm against my ear. "It's not so bad," she whispered, her voice teasing. I didn't answer. I couldn't. What was there to say? We were both here now, caught in this moment, unable to break free. As the night wore on, we all gave in to Peter's desires, each of us caught in the whirlwind of pleasure and regret that came with it. The thrill, the forbidden nature of it was intoxicating. But as much as I tried to bury the guilt, it was there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to be more than a simple favor. But in that room, room 205, the boundaries had been crossed. And once they were, there was no going back. The night felt like a blur. And yet every detail was etched in my memory. The way Peter's breath quickened, how Anna's presence had shifted everything, and the oppressive silence that followed once the last of our actions had played out. There was no turning back. I had crossed a line I never thought I'd step near, let alone cross. But there I was, still sitting in the dim light of room 205, as if the world had not changed at all. Peter leaned back against the plush cushions of the sofa, a satisfied smile playing on his lips, his hand resting casually on his lap. I could feel the warmth of his skin against mine as I sat beside him, my body tense, my mind racing. I had given him what he wanted, what we had all somehow agreed to. And now, as the silence settled over the room, I realized that we were in something deeper, something darker, than I had ever imagined. Anna sat next to me, her expression unreadable. I could see that she, too, was caught in the aftereffects of what had just transpired, satisfied, yet somehow unsure of what to do next. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. We were supposed to be in control, setting the terms, having fun in the way only two young women could. But instead, it felt like we had both become pawns in Peter's game. His pleasure our duty, his desires our responsibility. Then came the sound of a phone vibrating, breaking the silence like a slap. Peter's face tightened, his eyes flicking to his phone that had just buzzed on the table. He picked it up without a second thought, glancing at the screen before his expression darkened. I couldn't see the message, but the change in his demeanor was impossible to ignore. "This isn't good," he muttered under his breath, his voice laced with frustration. Anna's eyebrows furrowed. "What is it?" she asked, a touch of curiosity in her voice. Peter's gaze flickered toward the door, then back to the phone. "Someone saw us." A cold shiver ran down my spine. My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean someone saw us?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he just stared at the phone in his hand, his fingers gripping it so tightly his knuckles turned white. The silence in the room felt unbearable, like we were waiting for something inevitable. Finally, Peter spoke again, his voice strained. Tyler knows. My stomach dropped. Tyler. My mother. The woman who had trusted him, who had believed in their marriage, who had no idea what was happening behind her back. Tyler was in London for a big event, and she had no reason to suspect that the man she loved, the man she had married, was sitting in a hotel room with her daughter and another woman, satisfying his deepest, darkest fantasies. But Tyler knew now. Somehow, someone had caught us. Their eyes had been too sharp, their curiosity too much to ignore. And now the truth was about to come crashing down. Peter cursed under his breath and stood up, pacing the room. Damn it, he muttered, his mind clearly racing. I have to fix this. Fix it. I echoed, my voice shaking. How do you fix something like this? Peter didn't answer. He grabbed his phone again, his fingers moving quickly as he typed something out. I could see the urgency in his movements. This wasn't just a minor scandal, this was the kind of thing that could ruin everything. His wealth, his power, his business empire, all of it was at risk. But what about me? What about the pieces of my life I hadn't even realized I was sacrificing until now? As Peter continued to type, I heard the faint sound of a notification ping from Anna's phone. She quickly glanced at it, her eyes widening before she looked at me. Her face was pale, her expression frozen in disbelief. Shakira, she whispered, her voice tense. It's a picture. I felt the blood drain from my face. A picture. The thought of it made me sick. Someone had captured us. Someone had seen the secret, the betrayal, and now it was out there for the world to see. Before I could react, Peter's phone rang, the sharp tone slicing through the tension in the room. His face went white. Without a word, he answered it. Tyler, he said, his voice low and strained. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. There was a pause, and I could only imagine what was happening on the other end of the line. I couldn't bring myself to listen, but every word Peter spoke sent chills down my spine. I could feel it, Tyler's anger, her heartbreak, the betrayal she must have felt. She had trusted him. She had trusted us. Peter's voice grew quieter, more urgent. Tyler, I can explain. But whatever he was about to say, whatever excuse he was preparing, it didn't matter. Because within minutes, the conversation was over. He hung up the phone and looked at us, his eyes wide, filled with panic. She's coming, he said, his voice trembling. She's on her way here. Right now. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears, louder than anything else in the room. Peter had been caught. And now my mother, the woman who had given me everything, who had trusted me, was coming to confront us. The door to the hotel room seemed to close in on me. There was no escape. I wanted to run, to hide, but where could I go? I had made my choices, and now they were catching up with me, faster than I could outrun them. Anna stood up, pacing nervously. What are we going to do? She asked, her voice strained. Peter didn't answer right away. His mind was elsewhere, scrambling for a way to salvage the mess we had created. But it was too late. It was already over. I stared at the door, waiting for the inevitable. And when it came, the sound of high heels clicking on the marble floor outside the room, the soft hum of the elevator arriving, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Tyler entered, her face a mix of fury and disbelief. She didn't look at Peter at first. Her eyes found me, her daughter, her flesh and blood. And in that look, in that one brief moment of silence, I saw the weight of everything we had done. Tyler didn't speak at first. She didn't need to. The truth was written all over her face. And then finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I trusted you. Both of you. The devastation in her voice shattered me. I wanted to apologize, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come. There was nothing left to say. And just like that, everything fell apart. Have you ever imagined yourself in this kind of situation? And I know so many things could be going on in your mind. What did you do about it? Subscribe to this channel, like, and hit on notifications for more interesting stories like this.